A city of stone floats between the clouds and the earth. Machu Picchu is not merely a ruin, but a monumental puzzle carved into a mountain peak 8,000 feet high. How did a civilization without the wheel, iron tools, or any written plan achieve this? By the end of this journey, you will understand the precise, impossible engineering that transformed a knife-edge ridge into an enduring masterpiece. We will uncover how they moved 50-ton stones up narrow paths and built walls that survive earthquakes. What does it truly take to build a civilization against the sky? The ridge itself was a statement carved by nature. This was no welcoming valley floor, but a precarious saddle of rock suspended between two soaring peaks, a place where the earth seemed to breathe with tremors and the sky wept torrents for months on end. To choose this site was to accept a constant, violent negotiation with the mountain. So why here? Why commit to a location where every single necessity, from water to food to building stone, presented a near vertical challenge? The answer lies beyond mere practicality. Geologists and archaeologists point to the profound spiritual geography of the Inca world. These twin peaks, Huayna Picchu and Machu Picchu Mountain, were considered sacred apus, powerful mountain spirits. Building here was an act of reverence, a way to commune directly with the divine forces of the earth. It was also an undeniable display of imperial power, a declaration that the Inca could not only conquer nature's most defiant landscapes, but could forge a masterpiece upon them. Yet that declaration came with an almost unimaginable price tag in human effort. Imagine the logistics. Thousands of workers needed shelter on slopes where flat ground did not exist. Every tool, every basket of food, every block of granite had to be carried up steep, winding paths from the valley floor thousands of feet below. Most critically, a city cannot survive without water, and this mountain ridge offered no spring, no river. The very first and most fundamental challenge was not construction, but survival. This transforms our understanding of Machu Picchu from its very inception. It was never just a city. It was a fortress of faith, an engineering statement written in stone against the sky. And every solution we will explore began with this raw, elemental confrontation between human will and an untamed mountain. This precarious mountain ridge presented its first and most dangerous lie. It appeared solid, unyielding granite, but the truth was far more fragile. Beneath a thin skin of soil lay slopes primed for collapse, ready to surrender to the relentless downpours of the cloud forest. Before a single temple could be envisioned, the Incas had to perform radical surgery on the mountain itself. They began not with walls but with steps, giant, sweeping steps carved directly into the mountainside. Over 700 of these agricultural terraces cascade down the slopes of Machu Picchu, transforming sheer drops into a cascading stone waterfall. This was not merely farming, it was the art of terrace engineering, and it served as the critical, life-giving foundation for everything that followed. Each terrace was a meticulously crafted sandwich. Workers first laid a deep base of fist-sized stones, creating a porous layer for water to drain through rapidly. On top of that, they added layers of gravel, then coarse sand, and finally a rich layer of topsoil hauled up from the valley floor. This was not just dirt on a ledge. It was a sophisticated, multi-layered filtration system, a built-in answer to the mountain's greatest threat, water. During the intense rainy season, these terraces acted like a giant sponge. Water would percolate down through the soil, sand, and gravel, then be channeled away by the stone base before it could gain the destructive force to trigger a mudslide. But the genius extended beyond erosion control. The retaining walls themselves, often beautifully curved and leaning slightly inward, locked the terraces in place through gravity and interlocking stone. Modern engineers still study this technique for its elegant stability. Furthermore, by facing the terraces toward the sun, the Incas created a series of microclimates. The stone walls absorbed heat during the day and released it slowly at night, protecting crops from frost and allowing them to cultivate a stunning variety of plants, from potatoes and maize to ceremonial coca and medicinal herbs. In one sweeping act of transformation, they turned a lethal, unstable slope into a stable, fertile, and living platform. The mountain had been tamed not by force but by profound understanding. Its slopes were now ready to bear the weight of a civilization. With the mountain's slopes secured, the true architectural miracle could begin. The walls of Machu Picchu are not just structures, they are a language written in stone, a testament to a philosophy of building in harmony with the earth. The most iconic examples are those breathtaking ashlar walls, where massive granite blocks are dressed and fitted together with such impossible precision that the seams all but disappear. This is the pinnacle of Inca dry stone masonry, and it defies everything we assume about ancient construction. There is no mortar here, no cement, no adhesive of any kind. The entire system relies on two principles: precision and gravity. Each stone was a unique puzzle piece, shaped over countless hours to interlock perfectly with its neighbors. Modern stonemasons who study these techniques describe a process of listening to the rock. Workers would strike a granite boulder with another stone, listening to the sound it made to find its natural fracture lines. Then, using only harder river cobbles as hammers and abrasive sand, they would peck and grind away, slowly revealing the form within. This was not cutting in the modern sense. It was a conversation with the material, a patient subtraction until the ideal shape emerged. This philosophy resulted in a spectrum of masonry styles, each with purpose. The sturdy, rustic polygonal walls of the agricultural sectors used larger, irregular stones locked together like a three-dimensional jigsaw, providing immense strength for retaining earth. But in the sacred heart of the city, the stonework transforms. Here, in the Temple of the Sun and the royal residences, the blocks become rectangular, their surfaces smooth, and their joints so tight that legend claims not even a razor blade can slip between them. The trapezoidal shape, seen in every doorway, window, and niche, is the signature of Inca seismic genius. Unlike a rectangle, which can rack and collapse under lateral force, a trapezoid is inherently stable. Its sloping sides guide energy downward and inward, back into the foundation. During an earthquake, a mortar-bound wall cracks and crumbles, but a dry stone Inca wall is designed to breathe. The stones literally dance, shifting and settling against one another, and when the tremor passes, they simply settle back into a new, equally stable configuration. The ultimate symbol of this interlocking intelligence is the famous stone with 12 angles. Nestled into a wall in the royal sector, this single block is a masterpiece of geometry, its complex facets fitting seamlessly into the stones surrounding it on all sides. It was not made for show, it was the perfect engineering solution, a keystone of stability that locks that entire section of the wall together. To stand before it is to witness a map of immense patience, a single stone that represents months, perhaps years, of skilled labor. This was not merely construction, it was a form of stone weaving, creating a fabric of granite so resilient it has held fast through centuries of tremors. Yet, even with walls that could defy earthquakes, a city on a cloud-shrouded peak faces a more insistent daily challenge, one that flows and cannot be carved, the relentless, life-giving demand for water. The granite for those perfect walls began its journey far from the serene plazas of the finished city. High on the slopes above Machu Picchu, tucked against the shoulder of the mountain, lies the main quarry. This was a landscape of deliberate chaos, a workshop of the gods where the raw material of the mountain was harvested. Here, teams of workers faced the first brutal task: freeing multi-ton blocks from the living rock using nothing but stone hammers and occasionally bronze chisels. They worked with an understanding of granite's nature, striking along natural fissures and using heat from fires followed by sudden drenching with water to fracture the stone. The quarry itself presents a critical clue to the Incas' logistical genius. It was not below the construction site, but strategically placed above it. This was no accident. Every block they extracted began its journey with a powerful, silent partner, gravity. Moving a 50-ton block of stone down a narrow, winding mountain path without wheels, without draft animals, and without iron tools seems like a task from mythology. Yet the evidence suggests a symphony of simple physics and immense coordinated effort. The prevailing theory involves a combination of earthen ramps, lubricated with clay, and a system of log rollers. Teams would have levered a block onto a bed of sturdy logs. As the stone was pulled forward with ropes made of braided leather and tough plant fibers, workers behind would constantly retrieve the logs from the back and place them in front, creating a continuous rolling path. On steeper descents, they may have used gravity to their advantage, controlling the stone's slide with massive rope brakes anchored by teams of men. The paths themselves, often no wider than a few feet, required not just strength but incredible precision and communication. A single misstep could send an irreplaceable block, and the men guiding it tumbling into the abyss. This operation demanded more than just brawn. It required a vast, organized society. The Incas mobilized this workforce through a system known as the Mita, a form of labor tax owed by communities across the empire. Skilled stonemasons from the sacred capital of Cusco would have provided the expert direction, while rotating teams of laborers from conquered territories supplied the raw manpower. It was a temporary service, not enslavement, a duty that bound the empire together through shared monumental projects. The scale of this coordination is frozen in time at the site's so-called unfinished temple. Here, partially shaped stones still lie attached to the bedrock, and others rest on smaller stones as if waiting for the next team to arrive. This area is a priceless snapshot, a paused moment in the construction process that lets us see the method behind the madness, the organized progression from raw rock to refined geometry. Once these monumental pieces arrived at the building site, the final and most delicate phase began, the act of placement. How did they lift these giants into position? The answer likely lies in the humble earth ramp once more. Archaeologists suggest that as courses of stone were laid, workers would build temporary ramps of rubble and earth against the rising wall. Blocks would be painstakingly rolled or dragged up these slopes and then carefully levered into their final position. After the wall was complete, the ramp would be dismantled, leaving no trace of the method behind the miracle. This seamless transition from transport to assembly underscores a holistic vision. The quarry, the path, and the plaza were all links in one continuous chain of engineering, a testament to a culture that could think on the scale of a mountain and execute with the patience of centuries. Yet, even with walls securely locked in place, the city on the cloud forest ridge faced its most persistent and vital test, a challenge that flowed and could not be carved, the relentless, life-giving demand for water. The soft, persistent sound of water flowing through stone is the hidden heartbeat of Machu Picchu. While the walls defy earthquakes, this gentle murmur represents a quieter, more vital triumph. High on a mountain ridge with no river or lake, the Incas faced an existential puzzle. Their solution was not to conquer water, but to conduct it, transforming a single, modest spring into a city's lifeblood through pure hydraulic genius. On the steep north slope of the mountain, over a mile from the city's center, they discovered a natural spring seeping from the bedrock. This was not a gushing source, but a fragile trickle. Capturing it required a work of subterranean art. They built a stone collection wall to gently gather the seepage. funneling it into a meticulously carved stone channel only about 5 inches wide. From that moment, gravity took over and every calculation had to be perfect. The primary canal, stretching over half a mile to the city, is a masterpiece of gradient engineering. Modern surveys show it descends at an average slope of just 3%. This precise angle was no accident, too steep, and the water would rush violently, eroding the channel and arriving in a turbulent, muddy surge. Too shallow and the flow would stagnate, allowing sediment to build up and algae to grow. The 3% grade was the sweet spot, ensuring a constant, clear, and gentle flow that could make the journey without losing its purity. This stone-lined aqueduct, often hidden beneath vegetation or covered with slabs, was the city's main artery, but the true elegance is seen in its distribution. The water was channeled into a sequential series of 16 ceremonial fountains known as pacas. These were not mere utilities, they were expressions of sacred order and social hierarchy. The first and largest fountain, nestled within the royal enclosure, was reserved exclusively for the Inca emperor, its water considered the most pristine. From there, the water cascaded from one fountain to the next, each step down serving a different sector of the city, the nobility, the priests, and finally the artisans and caretakers. This was a physical manifestation of the Inca social structure, flowing from the top down, yet the system had to handle not just provision but also deluge. The cloud forest dumps torrential rain for months each year, and without a way to manage that volume, the city would have flooded and eroded from within. Beneath the beautiful plazas lies a hidden underworld of drainage. The Incas constructed deep foundations of crushed rock, creating a porous subfloor that acted like a giant French drain. Water would seep through the stone pavements, percolate down through this gravel layer, and be channeled away by stone-lined subterranean conduits. A stunning example is found in the so-called priest's house, where a beautifully carved drainage channel runs directly through the foundation of the structure, exiting the wall as a discrete spout. It is artful, invisible functionality. This integrated system capture, delivery, distribution, and drainage formed a closed hydrological loop. It required an intimate understanding of hydrology, topography, and stonework that feels astonishingly modern. For over 500 years, through seasons of drought and monsoon, this silent river of ingenuity flowed without fail, turning a waterless ridge into a habitable sanctuary. It is the unseen engineering that made the visible marvel possible, and it forces us to ask a final, profound question. With such mastery over stone and water, with a city that seemed built for eternity, why was this cloud forest masterpiece abandoned so completely, leaving only whispers and stones for the jungle to reclaim? The city's engineering was never just about survival, it was a conversation with the sky. Machu Picchu stones are arranged not only for stability, but as a vast observatory, a physical calendar designed to harness the power of the cosmos. This is most dramatically revealed at dawn on the summer solstice. As the sun crests the distant peaks, a single, brilliant shaft of light pierces a carefully positioned window of the Temple of the Sun. Inside, it illuminates a ceremonial stone altar with pinpoint accuracy, a celestial event engineered into architecture. This moment was not a lucky accident but the culmination of a profound worldview where engineering served cosmology. The Incas saw their empire, the Tawantinsuyu, as a sacred reflection of the heavens, and every structure was a stitch binding earth to sky. Archaeoastronomers who study these ancient alignments map a city alive with intention. Temples, windows, and freestanding pillars act as precise instruments, tracking the sun's journey across the seasons. The recurring trapezoid, so vital for earthquake resistance, also held deep symbolic meaning. Its shape, wider at the base and narrowing toward the top, mirrored the sacred peaks of the Andes and represented the Inca concept of the three worlds, the underworld, the earthly plane, and the celestial realm. This geometry was both a physical law and a spiritual principle embedded in every doorway and niche. The ultimate symbol of this cosmic engineering is the Intihuatana stone. Carved from a single outcrop of bedrock at the city's highest ceremonial point, its name is often translated as the hitching post of the sun. This intricately shaped pillar is a masterpiece of precision stonework, its angles and planes calculated to interact with the sun's path throughout the year. At noon on the equinoxes, when day and night are of equal length, the pillar casts no shadow at all, a moment of perfect balance engineered in stone. It served as both an astronomical clock and a spiritual device, a place where priests could symbolically tether the sun to ensure its return, guaranteeing the cycles of planting and harvest. This celestial blueprint extends to the very layout of the city. The entire urban plan is oriented in alignment with the surrounding sacred mountains, the Apus. The main thoroughfare points directly toward the towering peak of Huayna Picchu, while other sightlines connect to significant solstice, sunrise, and sunset points on the horizon. The mountains themselves were not just a backdrop, they were active participants in the city's sacred geometry. This transforms our understanding of the entire project. Machu Picchu was not merely an architectural conquest of a difficult mountain, it was a deliberate act of cosmic harmony. The water channels mirrored the Milky Way, the terraces echoed the contours of the sacred landscape, and the stones themselves were tuned to the sun's rhythm. Every engineering solution, from the earthquake-proof walls to the life-giving aqueduct, was in service of a greater goal: to create a permanent, resonant point of connection between humanity and the divine order of the universe. Yet this profound connection raises a haunting final mystery. If the city was such a perfect fusion of earth, water, and sky, a sacred anchor for the empire, why was it ultimately left behind, its perfect alignments watching over silent plazas? The ground beneath the Andes does not rest. It is a landscape born of collision, where tectonic plates grind against one another in a slow, perpetual dance that often turns violent. For any structure built here, the question is not if the earth will shake, but when and how violently. The stones of Machu Picchu hold the answer to a seismic code written 5 centuries before modern engineering. This is not architecture designed to rigidly resist, but to gracefully respond, a principle experts call dynamic design. Every element, from the grandest temple to the simplest retaining wall, was engineered with movement in mind. The signature trapezoidal shape of every doorway, window, and niche is the most visible clue. Unlike a rectangle, which can easily twist and collapse under lateral force, the sloping sides of a trapezoid create a stable, self-bracing form. During a tremor, the energy is guided downward and inward, back into the foundation. Look closer, and you will see that the walls themselves are not plumb vertical. They lean subtly inward, a technique that lowers the center of gravity and further counters the toppling force of a quake. Even the individual stones tell a story of flexibility. Master stonemasons often dress the blocks to be slightly convex on their outer faces. When fitted together, this creates a subtle, rounded surface where the stones meet at their edges, not their centers. This allows for minute pivoting and settling, transforming a solid wall into a flexible lattice that can shift and then settle back. The genius extends to the corners, often reinforced with uniquely shaped L-shaped blocks that interlock the two walls, preventing them from pulling apart. But the real secret lies beneath your feet. Before the first stone was laid, the Incas prepared the ground with profound understanding. For major structures, they would excavate down to the solid bedrock and then create a level platform. In other areas, they built foundations of deep, loose gravel. This layer acts as a shock absorber, dissipating the energy of seismic waves before it can travel up into the walls above. Modern engineers use a strikingly similar concept called base isolation, where buildings are set on flexible bearings to decouple them from ground motion. The Incas, through observation and experience, arrived at an analogous solution using stone and earth. Furthermore, the vast network of terraces we discussed earlier served a dual purpose. Beyond agriculture, they acted as giant retaining steps, stabilizing the entire mountainside and preventing catastrophic landslides during tremors. They compartmentalized the slope, so a failure in one area would not trigger a collapse of the entire city. This holistic approach created a resilient system. When an earthquake strikes, a mortared, rigid building fights the motion until it cracks. The dry stone walls of Machu Picchu are designed to do the opposite. They absorb the energy, allowing the stones to sway and settle against each other, dancing with the earth rather than resisting it. After the shaking stops, they often find a new, equally stable configuration. This resilience is not an accident of primitive method, but the result of centuries of learned harmony with a volatile environment. It forces us to see their engineering not as a conquest of nature, but as a profound collaboration. They listened to the mountain, understood its tremors, and built a city that could whisper back. The silent stones of Machu Picchu were shaped by a living, breathing human orchestra. High on the mountain's flanks, far from the polished royal plaza, archaeologists have uncovered the remnants of a bustling temporary city, a sprawling encampment of simple stone dwellings where the builders themselves lived. This was the true engine of the miracle, a community of thousands who transformed the emperor's vision into granite reality. To understand how, we must step into the world of the Mita, the ingenious labor system that powered the Inca Empire. This was not slavery, but a form of rotational public service, a tax paid not in gold or grain, but in time and effort. Communities from across the Tawantinsuyu would send crews of workers for set periods, often during the agricultural off-season, to contribute to imperial projects like roads, storehouses, and sacred sites. For Machu Picchu, this meant a constantly rotating workforce, a river of human energy flowing up the mountain paths. Estimates suggest that at any given time, several thousand individuals lived and worked on that ridge, a monumental feat of social organization achieved without a single written memo or blueprint. The coordination was a masterpiece of verbal precision and hierarchical skill. At the top were the master architects and stonemasons, likely sent from the imperial capital of Cusco. These were the artists who could listen to a stone, the engineers who understood gradients and seismic principles. Beneath them were specialized teams, quarrymen who expertly fractured bedrock, transporters who mastered the log rolling descent, and a vast corps of general laborers who moved earth, built ramps, and hauled materials. Every task was broken down, every team knew its role, and communication flowed through a chain of overseers who reported progress using the knotted string records known as quippers. The provisioning of this remote army was a logistical triumph equal to the construction itself. Every single calorie consumed on that mountain had to be carried up from the fertile Yorubamba Valley below. State-run storehouses or kolkas in the lowlands would have been packed with freeze-dried potatoes, quinoa, maize, and dried llama meat, all transported along the Inca highway network by porters and llama trains. The discovery of distinct pottery styles in the workers' quarters tells a subtle story, fragments from different regions of the empire, suggesting crews brought their own cultural identities and perhaps their own cooks to this mountaintop endeavor. Their living conditions, while basic, were organized with typical Inca efficiency. The residential zones were separate from the sacred core, built with functional, rustic stonework. They had shared hearths, water from the lower fountains, and likely a strong sense of communal purpose. The work was undoubtedly perilous and exhausting, a life of calloused hands and disciplined routine under the watchful eyes of the Apus, the mountain spirits. Yet, participating in such a sacred project also carried prestige and fulfilled a communal duty to the empire and the divine. This human machine operated with a stunning, silent efficiency. It was the pinnacle of imperial administration and collective will, proving that the Incas' greatest resource was not gold, but a perfectly harnessed, organized populace. They built not with machines, but with a society engineered for monumental purpose. And when the last stone was fitted and the final terrace wall locked into place, this temporary city of workers would have been dismantled, the crews returning home, leaving behind only their immense, anonymous legacy in stone. This raises the final, haunting layer of the mystery, for if the building of Machu Picchu was such a colossal, deliberate act of imperial and spiritual expression, why did its story end not with a bang, but with a whisper, leaving this cloud forest masterpiece to the silence of the jungle? A 50-ton granite block does not simply ascend a mountain. It must be persuaded, coaxed, and danced upward along a path no wider than a person's outstretched arms. This was the daily, perilous reality of construction at Machu Picchu, a ballet of physics and human will performed thousands of feet above safety. To move these colossal stones from the quarries to the sacred ridge, the Incas orchestrated a symphony of simple machines, transforming impossible weight into manageable momentum. The first act was preparation. Before a stone ever budged, teams would construct temporary earthen ramps, packing soil and rubble to create a smooth, controlled incline. The block itself might be placed on a sledge of sturdy logs or directly onto a bed of smaller rolling logs. Here, friction was the enemy, and the Incas had a clever trick. Experimental archaeologists who have tried to replicate these methods found that wetting clay creates a remarkably effective lubricant. Teams likely poured water along the ramp, creating a slick surface that allowed a sledge to glide forward with significantly less effort. For the most massive stones, the primary technique appears to have been a system of log rollers. Imagine a giant granite rolling pin. As teams pulled with braided leather ropes from the front, other workers behind would constantly retrieve the logs from the rear and rush them to the front, creating a continuous rolling path beneath the stone. This required not just strength, but impeccable rhythm and communication. A chanted count or a rhythmic drumbeat would have been essential to coordinate the heave, the roll, and the reset, ensuring the stone moved as a single, controlled unit. The very roads they traveled were feats of engineering in themselves. The Inca trail network leading to the site was not a simple dirt path. Critical sections were paved with stone, edged with retaining walls to prevent collapses, and often furnished with steps. These were not obstacles but aids, providing a stable, predictable surface for the grueling transport operation. Yet even on prepared roads, the psychological and physical toll was immense. Motivating and safeguarding hundreds of workers in this environment was a managerial triumph. Overseers had to maintain morale and precision under the constant shadow of catastrophic accident. A single slipped log, a snapped rope, or a misstep could send an irreplaceable block, and the men around it careening off the cliff. This tangible, ever-present risk makes a solitary artifact along the approach trail so profoundly telling. Lying beside the path to Machu Picchu is a gigantic, partially shaped stone known as the Unmoved Stone. It is a monument to a moment where the persuasion failed. Perhaps the block fractured, or a logistical snarl proved insurmountable, or the season changed. For whatever reason, the workers and their overseers made the decision to abandon it, leaving it as a permanent testament to the struggle that preceded every other success. Seeing that lone, forsaken block completes the picture, it transforms the perfect walls of the city from a static wonder into a victory-hard one, stone by impossible stone, each one a story of coordinated breath and straining muscle against the indifferent mountain. This human triumph over gravity leads us to the final, silent witness of the city's purpose, a stone that did not move mountains but captured the sun itself. From the air, Machu Picchu reveals its true nature as a meticulously zoned metropolis. The chaotic topography is tamed into a logical tripartite plan, a city divided with geometric clarity into three distinct sectors: agricultural, urban, and religious. This was no organic settlement that grew over time, but a single, master-planned vision executed from the first stone. The sprawling agricultural terraces form a vast green apron around the city's western and southern flanks, a productive buffer and foundation. The urban sector, containing residences and workshops, clusters in the center, and the sacred religious precinct with its temples and plazas, occupies the highest eastern ground, closest to the rising sun and the sacred peaks. This division was not merely practical, it was a physical manifestation of the Inca worldview, a map of social order and spiritual hierarchy etched into the mountainside. At the heart of this plan lies the main plaza, a long, grassy corridor that acts as the city's central artery and ceremonial stage. Flanking this open space are the most important structures, creating a clear social geography. To the north, perched above the plaza, sits the royal enclosure with its finely cut ashlar masonry, the likely residence of the Inca emperor and his retinue during visits. Directly opposite, to the south, rises the sacred sector, anchored by the semicircular Temple of the Sun and the enigmatic Temple of the Three Windows. This deliberate placement was intentional theater. The elite lived literally across from the gods, with a communal plaza between them, visually reinforcing the connection between divine authority and imperial power. Every citizen's place within the social and cosmic order was reinforced by the very layout of their city. This grand design was supported by an invisible web of functionality. The sophisticated water network we explored earlier was meticulously tiered to serve this hierarchy. The first, purest fountain watered the royal enclosure. Subsequent fountains cascaded down to serve the temple priests, then the artisans in their separate industrial zone, and finally the agricultural terraces. Even waste and rainwater were managed with precision. A hidden grid of stone-lined drainage channels runs beneath the entire urban sector, each carefully sloped to carry runoff away from buildings and plazas, channeling it safely over the terrace walls. This independent servicing of each zone meant the city could function as a harmonious whole without any sector's needs disrupting another. Each district had a specialized purpose. Beyond the main terraces, a discrete industrial area provided space for tool-making, pottery, and metalworking. The secluded royal tomb area, nestled into a natural cave beneath the Temple of the Sun, was a deeply private funerary space separated from the daily bustle. And the architecture itself was often a frame for sacred geography. The Temple of the Three Windows is a perfect example. Its enormous trapezoidal openings carefully oriented not just for structural stability, but to perfectly frame specific, revered mountain peaks on the horizon. The windows acted as a living painting, permanently aligning the temple's interior with the eternal apus. This masterful urban plan transforms Machu Picchu from a collection of brilliant engineering feats into a coherent, living organism. Every stone, every channel, every sightline was part of a grand social and cosmological design. The chaos of the mountain peak was not just conquered, it was organized into a perfect diagram of Inca civilization, a three-dimensional model of their universe. Yet, such a deliberate, invested, and perfect creation makes its ultimate fate even more perplexing. Why would a civilization capable of this level of integrated design ever walk away from its cloud forest masterpiece, leaving its perfect order to the silent, reclaiming green? The soundtrack of Machu Picchu's creation was not the roar of machinery, but the sharp, percussive crack of stone meeting stone. This persistent rhythm, echoing across the quarries for decades, was produced by a surprisingly humble toolbox. Without iron or steel, without even the advantage of the wheel, the Inca builders faced a fundamental paradox. Their canvas was granite, one of the hardest stones on earth. To shape it, they turned to an even harder truth that some stones can break others. Their primary tools were not forged in fire but collected from riverbeds. They sought out cobbles of hematite and diorite, minerals significantly tougher than the granite they were meant to shape. These natural hammers, known as hammerstones, were the workhorses of the operation. In the hands of a skilled worker, a hammerstone became a precision instrument. The technique, studied by lithic analysts who specialize in ancient stone tools, is called percussion flaking. A worker would strike the granite boulder at a precise angle, using the hammerstone like a chisel to pop off small flakes along a desired line. It was a subtractive art, a conversation of controlled force. For finer work and the breathtakingly smooth surfaces of the sacred buildings, they employed abrasion. Using sand, often from a harder mineral like quartz, mixed with water, they would grind the stone surfaces smooth. Teams would rub wooden blocks or even the stones themselves back and forth, the abrasive slurry slowly wearing down the granite over hundreds of hours. This method alone explains the glassy finish on stones in the Temple of the Sun. The toolkit expanded slightly for specific tasks. Bronze, an alloy of copper and tin, was known to the Incas and used for ceremonial objects and some tools. While too soft to cut granite directly, bronze crowbars were invaluable for levering massive blocks into position. There is also evidence from faint, narrow grooves on some stones that they may have used copper or bronze chisels for detailed incising, though these would have required constant resharpening. The proof of these methods is etched into the site itself. On unfinished stones like those in the quarry or at the unfinished temple, you can still see the distinctive pockmarks and parallel striations left by hammerstones and abrasive grinding. Archaeologists have also recovered countless worn hammerstones from the work areas, their surfaces battered and rounded from relentless use, each one a record of immense human effort. The definitive test of this theory came from experimental archaeology. In one notable project, researchers using only replica Inca tools, hammerstones, sand, water, and simple levers, successfully shaped a modest block of granite. The result was undeniable, but the process was grueling. It took a team of experienced individuals many days to produce what a single worker with modern tools could do in hours. This experiment did not diminish the Inca achievement, it illuminated its true nature. Their greatest technology was not a metal or a machine, but applied knowledge, patient observation, and the coordinated effort of thousands. Every perfect seam in those iconic walls represents countless considered strikes, an ocean of time condensed into stone. This understanding shifts our perspective from wondering how they did it to marveling at the sheer cultural will that sustained such a meticulous, generation-spanning project. It forces a new question: if the building was this deliberate, what was the ultimate purpose of a city forged with such sacred, relentless patience? The terraces of Machu Picchu were far more than structural supports. They were a living, breathing agricultural engine, a breadbasket suspended in the clouds. To sustain a permanent population in such isolation, the Incas had to master the science of mountain farming, transforming 700 stone steps into a self-sufficient food system. The secret was not in growing a single crop, but in cultivating an entire landscape of microclimates. Each terrace level, with its unique angle to the sun, depth of soil, and drainage pattern, became a distinct ecological niche. The higher, sun-drenched terraces facing north could nurture maize, a crop demanding warmth and light. Just a few steps down, a slightly shadier, cooler terrace was perfect for hardy potatoes. On the lower, moister levels, quinoa and other tubers would thrive. This vertical zoning allowed them to cultivate a stunning diversity of plants, from staple foods to medicinal herbs and ceremonial coca, creating a resilient and varied diet from a single mountainside. This agricultural miracle was rooted in the very soil under their feet. The layered construction of the terraces, which we discussed for erosion control, was also a masterclass in soil science. That deep base of stones acted as a drain, but the layers above it, the gravel, sand, and imported topsoil, worked together like a sophisticated filter and battery. They prevented vital nutrients from being washed away during heavy rains, a process called leaching. More remarkably, the stone-retaining walls absorbed heat from the sun during the day. As temperatures plummeted in the thin mountain air at night, these walls would slowly release that stored warmth, creating a protective thermal blanket that shielded tender seedlings from frost. The terraces were not passive planters, they were active, climate-controlled growing chambers. Protein was integrated into this system with elegant simplicity. Within the stone-walled enclosures near the living quarters, families likely kept small herds of guinea pigs. These animals were not pets but a vital source of meat. They could thrive on crop waste, required little space, and reproduced quickly, providing a sustainable and efficient protein source within the city's confines. For irrigation, while the main aqueduct supplied drinking water, smaller capillary channels likely branched through the terrace complex. Workers could manually divert water from the fountain sequence to specific terraces during dry spells, giving them precise control over moisture levels for different crops. This was agriculture as high-precision engineering. Today, researchers and local communities have revived this ancient wisdom. On some of Machu Picchu's terraces, you can see reconstructions of traditional Andean crops growing once more, a living museum of this lost agricultural science. Seeing potatoes with deep purple flesh or multicolored maize sprouting from these historic beds makes the past tangible. It reminds us that this was never a silent city of stone, but a vibrant, green, and nourishing habitat. The rhythmic work of planting and harvest was the steady heartbeat that powered the spiritual and architectural marvel above. Every temple, every plaza, was built upon the quiet, abundant success of these sky-high gardens. This self-sufficiency raises a pivotal question. If the city could feed itself and was engineered to last for millennia, what powerful force could ever prompt its inhabitants to simply walk away, leaving their fertile paradise to the encroaching forest? Granite was not just a building material, it was a divine medium. Every cut, every placement was a sacred dialogue. Before a single foundation was laid, Inca priests would have performed a foundational ritual, the offering to Pachamama, the Earth Mother. They would bury precious items like coca leaves or miniature llama figurines made of shell directly into the bedrock. This was not superstition, it was a contract, a request for permission to shape her body into a new form. This spiritual covenant was the invisible blueprint for every physical decision that followed. The entire site operates on the principle of sacred landscape, a concept scholars call the SEC system. Imagine invisible lines of spiritual energy radiating from the city's central temple, connecting it to specific mountain peaks, springs, and celestial events. Machu Picchu was not dropped onto this ridge, it was woven into this pre-existing cosmic web. The orientation of a temple, the shape of a window, even the placement of a water channel, were all dictated by priest astronomers reading this divine geography. Technical prowess served spiritual vision. The trapezoidal shape of a doorway was not only earthquake-resistant, it mirrored the sacred peaks, the apus that watched over the city. A window in the Temple of the Sun was not just an opening for light, it was a precision instrument designed to capture the first rays of the winter solstice, bathing a ceremonial stone in a specific, calculated beam. This turns every engineering marvel into an act of devotion. Scattered throughout the city are huacas, natural rock formations that were revered as shrines. Instead of leveling a peculiarly shaped outcrop, the builders incorporated it. They carved steps into it, shaped altars upon it, or built walls around it, honoring the mountain's own sacred expressions. A powerful example is the Room of the Mortars. In this small chamber, two perfectly cylindrical basins are carved into the living rock floor. For decades, they were thought to be for grinding grain. But their alignment and precision suggest a far more celestial purpose. Some researchers propose they were filled with water to reflect the night sky, acting as primitive observatories to track constellations vital to the Inca calendar. Others see them as ceremonial receptacles for offerings. Their true purpose may be a combination, a beautiful fusion of practical observation and ritual practice. This perspective resolves the central mystery of the impossible effort. The backbreaking labor of moving a 50-ton stone was not merely a construction task, it was a procession. The patient grinding of a granite surface to a mirror finish was an act of reverence, polishing a vessel for divine energy. The city was built because the mountain called for it, and the heavens demanded it. The engineering was the physical manifestation of a prayer, a permanent offering of stone to the cosmos. This ultimate purpose makes the city's final chapter not a mystery of failure, but a poignant transition in a much longer story. 50 years is a lifetime. 80 years spans multiple generations. This is the staggering temporal scale scholars now assign to the construction of Machu Picchu, a project that likely began under the great Emperor Pachacuti in the mid-15th century. How do we know this? The evidence comes from two converging lines of inquiry. First, carbon dating of tiny organic materials, bits of charcoal or plant matter that became trapped in the soil between terrace layers or in the foundations of buildings, provide scientific anchors in time. Second, historians cross-reference these dates with the recorded expansion of the Inca Empire. Pachacuti's reign was a period of explosive imperial growth and monumental building, and the style and ambition of Machu Picchu fit perfectly within his legacy. This timeline transforms the site from a single project into a living, evolving endeavor that witnessed the entire careers of master stonemasons and the passing of knowledge from elders to their apprentices. Understanding this duration requires seeing the construction in distinct, overlapping phases. The first and most critical phase was the radical reshaping of the mountain itself. For years, perhaps a decade or more, the primary work was not building up, but carving down and shoring up. Thousands of laborers focused solely on cutting wide swaths of terraces into the slopes, creating stable platforms and managing drainage. This foundational work had to be largely complete before the sacred core could rise with any security. Only then did the second phase begin, the raising of the major civic and religious structures. The quarry above the site would have been a hive of constant activity, with teams extracting, shaping, and transporting stones in a coordinated flow that lasted for decades. The final phase involved the finishing details, the smoothing of sacred stone surfaces, the carving of ceremonial niches, and the intricate fitting of the most prestigious buildings, work that demanded the highest skill and therefore the most time. We can almost see this progression frozen in the stonework itself. Walk through the city and you will notice a clear spectrum of masonry styles. The agricultural terraces and outer walls use functional, rustic polygonal stones, efficient and strong. But as you move inward toward the Temple of the Sun or the royal enclosure, the masonry transforms. The blocks become more rectangular, their surfaces are ground smooth, and the joints achieve that impossible knife-edge precision. This variation is not random. It likely represents different phases of construction or different tiers of specialized work crews assigned by the imperial administration. The rougher work could be done by rotating Mita labor crews, while the sacred geometry was reserved for the lifetime masters from Cusco, whose patient art defined the project's final century. This multi-generational timeline forces a profound shift in perspective. It means the project required not just a powerful emperor's command, but an unbroken chain of political stability and resource commitment spanning the reigns of multiple rulers. The state's machinery, its ability to feed, clothe, and organize thousands of workers season after season, decade after decade, could not falter. It speaks to an administrative and social continuity that is as impressive as the architecture itself. A worker might arrive as a young man to help build a terrace wall and return 20 years later with his own son to help dress stones for a temple whose foundations he helped level. The city grew slowly, organically, according to a master plan that outlived its original designers. This was not a sprint, but a marathon of cultural will, a testament to a civilization that thought in centuries, not seasons. Such an investment of time and lives was never made lightly, which makes the ultimate fate of this cloud forest masterpiece not an ending, but the next layer of its enduring mystery. The single, winding path that brought pilgrims and supplies to Machu Picchu was also its greatest vulnerability. From the serene plazas within, the surrounding landscape presents a breathtaking vista. But from a commander's perspective, that same landscape reveals a chillingly effective defensive design. The city is a fortress woven into the very fabric of the mountain, a place where every beautiful terrace and temple wall served a dual purpose of worship and security. The primary defense was the mountain itself. Machu Picchu sits on a narrow saddle of rock, flanked by sheer drops into the roaring Urubamba River canyon on two sides. These were natural cliffs no army could scale. The only feasible approaches were along the narrow ridge lines from the mountains to the east and west, and the Incas turned these into controlled, deadly funnels. The main entrance for visitors today, the Sun Gate or Intipunku, perfectly illustrates this strategy. This stone gateway is not at the city's edge, but over a mile away along the ridge. Anyone approaching from the primary Inca trail would have to pass through this narrow, easily guarded choke point long before they ever saw the city itself. Sentries stationed here had a clear, commanding view of the entire approach, with hours of warning before any potential threat could reach the urban core. But the defenses did not end at the gate. The famous agricultural terraces, so vital for food, also functioned as colossal, stepped ramparts. Their retaining walls, some over 15 feet high, created a series of vertical obstacles that would have been nearly impossible for an attacking force to ascend under a hail of stones or spears from above. These were not gentle slopes but engineered cliffs. Perhaps the most telling engineered feature is the dry moat, a deep, wide trench carved directly into the bedrock that separates the agricultural zone from the urban sector. This was not for water but for separation and control. It created a definitive boundary that could be crossed only at specific, narrow causeways, effectively creating an inner citadel within the already remote site. The city's layout itself minimized access points. A single main entrance, now a modest doorway in a wall, controlled all movement into the sacred and residential precincts. The streets within are not a grid, but a deliberate maze of narrow alleys and staircases, confusing to any outsider and easy to defend from above. From the strategic watchman's hut perched on a high outcrop, guards could monitor both the Sun Gate approach and the entire Urubamba Valley, a panoramic early warning system. Historians debate what this formidable security was meant to protect. Was it a secluded royal retreat, a sanctuary for the emperor and the sacred virgins of the sun, requiring absolute privacy and safety? Was it primarily a ceremonial center whose rituals demanded isolation from the profane world? Or was it a strategic stronghold, a fallback position and storehouse for the empire in a turbulent region? The evidence suggests it was all three. The defensive features are integrated too thoughtfully to be an afterthought. The dry moat is precisely placed. The terraces are strategically steepened on the most vulnerable approaches. The limited sight lines from outside mean the city remains hidden until you are virtually upon it. This reveals a final, brilliant layer of Inca genius. They did not see a conflict between beauty and strength, between spirituality and security. A temple could be a tower. A terrace could be a wall. A processional gateway could be a kill box. Machu Picchu was designed not just to touch the heavens, but to be untouchable from the earth. This seamless fusion of the sacred and the strategic makes its ultimate abandonment even more compelling. For if the city was so perfectly defended, what unseen force could have compelled its guardians to simply walk away, leaving its gates forever open to the wind? The final footsteps echoed, and then there was only the wind. Machu Picchu did not fall in fire or battle. It was simply left behind, its perfect stones slowly disappearing beneath a silent, green tide of moss and vine. This abandonment is not a footnote but the final, crucial chapter in the story of its preservation. By the mid-1600s, the city had vanished from all but the most localized memory, a ghost in the clouds. The prevailing theory points to a cataclysm that arrived from across the ocean. The Spanish conquest of the Inca Empire in the 1530s shattered the intricate imperial system that had sustained Machu Picchu. The Mita labor tax collapsed, the flow of supplies and skilled workers ceased, and the sacred pilgrimage routes fell into disuse. The city, utterly dependent on that vast imperial machinery, became a beautiful but stranded artifact. Research suggests another, more insidious force may have accelerated its end. Eurasian diseases like smallpox raced ahead of the Spanish conquistadors, devastating Andean populations who had no immunity. A remote, densely populated site like Machu Picchu would have been tragically vulnerable. The community likely dwindled not from invasion, but from illness and the slow unraveling of the world that made their home possible. They did not flee an army, they retreated from a broken system. Yet, in a profound paradox, this very abandonment became the city's salvation. Because it was never found by the Spanish, it was never looted for its gold, quarried for its stones, or repurposed as a colonial settlement. The relentless cloud forest that reclaimed it acted as a protective shroud. The dense vegetation stabilized the terraces, preventing soil erosion. The constant humidity, while encouraging moss growth, actually prevented the extreme freeze-thaw cycles that crack stone in more exposed climates. Compare this to Inca sites on the coast or in the valleys, many of which were systematically dismantled by the Spanish to build churches and haciendas, their stones scattered. Machu Picchu slept, preserved in a humid, living vault. Its memory was never truly lost. Local Quechua communities living in the lower valleys always knew of the stone city on the ridge they called Machu Picchu, the old peak. They tended its surrounding agricultural terraces and understood it as a sacred place of their ancestors. This indigenous knowledge was the fragile thread that kept the city connected to the world. The moment of modern rediscovery in 1911 perfectly illustrates this. American historian Hiram Bingham arrived seeking the lost city of Vilcabamba, the last Inca stronghold. It was a local farmer, Melchor Artiga, who knew the trails and the old stories, who led Bingham up the steep, overgrown slope. When they reached the site, they found several families living there, cultivating the ancient terraces. Bingham did not discover an untouched wilderness. He was guided to a place that had never been forgotten by the people to whom it mattered most. This twist of fate is central to the miracle we see today. The engineering endured because the city was abandoned peacefully and reclaimed completely. The jungle hid it from destruction, and the steadfast memory of the local people kept its location alive until a curious world was ready to appreciate not its gold but its genius. The stones survived because everyone, for a time, simply looked away. A laser beam sweeps silently across a 500-year-old stone wall, mapping imperfections smaller than a grain of sand. This is the new language of discovery at Machu Picchu, a conversation between past genius and future technology that reveals secrets without touching a single rock. Modern archaeologists no longer rely solely on trowels and brushes, instead employing a suite of non-invasive tools that let them see through soil and stone. Ground-penetrating radar sends pulses of energy into the earth, painting a picture of buried foundations, drainage channels, and potential ceremonial spaces that have lain hidden since the city was abandoned. It is archaeology without excavation, preserving the site while uncovering its hidden layers. The most revolutionary tool is LiDAR, which stands for light detection and ranging. Mounted on aircraft or drones, it fires millions of laser pulses through the dense cloud forest canopy. These pulses bounce back, creating a three-dimensional map of the ground surface stripped bare of vegetation. Recent LiDAR surveys of the entire Machu Picchu National Sanctuary have been transformative. They revealed a sprawling network of previously unknown agricultural terraces climbing slopes once thought too steep for cultivation, along with a complex web of ancient pathways linking the citadel to outlying settlements and shrines. This technology shows us that Machu Picchu was not an isolated island, but the vibrant heart of a much larger, managed landscape, a revelation that rewrites our understanding of its scale and purpose. From orbit, satellite imagery provides another macro lens. Specialists analyze multispectral data to detect subtle changes in vegetation health, which can indicate buried structures or ancient soil disturbances. They also monitor the site for minute signs of structural stress or erosion patterns invisible to the naked eye, allowing conservators to intervene before damage occurs. Closer to the ground, drones equipped with high-resolution cameras perform photogrammetry, capturing thousands of overlapping images. Software then stitches these together to build photorealistic, millimeter-accurate three-dimensional models of every building, terrace, and pathway. These digital twins are invaluable, serving as permanent records and allowing engineers to simulate stresses like earthquakes or heavy rainfall to plan stabilization efforts. Even the stones themselves are telling their stories to new instruments. Portable X-ray fluorescence devices can be held against a granite block to instantly analyze its chemical signature. By comparing this signature to samples from known quarries, geologists can now trace the precise origin of individual stones, mapping the incredible journeys of materials across the empire. This confirms with scientific certainty the logistical triumph of moving specific types of granite from distant sources to this mountain peak. Meanwhile, advanced software analyzes the precise angles and interlocking shapes of the masonry, quantifying the incredible skill involved in the dry stone construction, turning what was once an aesthetic marvel into a dataset of engineering precision. This fusion of ancient craft and modern science does more than satisfy curiosity. It fuels a mission of preservation. The detailed models and scans create a baseline, so any future shift or crack can be measured with absolute accuracy. They help identify areas where water infiltration is a risk or where tourist footfall might cause unseen stress below the surface. This technological dialogue across centuries is a form of respect, ensuring that the Inca's sacred dialogue with the mountain can continue. We are learning to listen to Machu Picchu with new ears, hearing not just the echo of a finished city, but the meticulous process of its creation, one laser pulse and data point at a time. The world is filled with ancient wonders, but Machu Picchu stands apart not for its size or age, but for its impossible conversation with the mountain. To truly measure its achievement, we must place it on a global stage. Picture the Great Pyramid of Giza rising from the flat, stable sands of the Egyptian desert, a monument to geometric precision and centralized royal power. Then envision the Roman Colosseum, anchored in the heart of a bustling metropolis, built with iron clamps, volcanic mortar, and the labor of tens of thousands. Finally, see Machu Picchu, a city woven into a knife-edge ridge 8,000 feet high, in a land that shakes and pours. This is not a contest of greatness, but a revelation of context. Each wonder solved the engineering puzzle presented by its own environment, and the Inca puzzle was by any measure the most unforgiving. The foundational difference lies in the very ground beneath their feet. The pyramids and the Colosseum were built on stable, flat foundations. Their primary battle was against gravity and the sheer scale of material. The Incas, however, fought a war on three fronts: gravity, seismic instability, and catastrophic water runoff, all on a 45-degree slope. They could not simply lay a foundation. They had to invent the ground itself through those hundreds of terraces before construction could even begin. This pre-engineering of the building site has no parallel in the ancient world. While Egyptian pharaohs commanded vast workforces to move stones across a desert plain, Inca planners first had to make the mountain itself agree to hold the stones. The resource base for these projects reveals another stark contrast. The Great Pyramid is often associated with a vast, centralized state employing labor on a monumental scale, a system focused on a single, transcendent goal for the divine king. Rome utilized a blend of skilled artisans, paid laborers, and those in service to the state. The Inca system, the Mita, was a rotational duty, a tax paid in labor by communities across the empire. This created a decentralized yet impeccably organized flow of specialized teams. There was no single, endless quarry crew, but a rotating river of workers bringing diverse skills from across the Andes. This system had to solve a problem the Egyptians and Romans did not face: delivering every worker, every tool, and every basket of food up thousands of feet of vertical gain before the workday could start. The logistics of sustaining the builders were as complex as the construction itself. Then we come to the materials and methods, the fingerprints of each civilization's genius. The Romans were masters of binding agents, using pozzolana, a volcanic ash, to create a concrete that could harden underwater and form the Colosseum's soaring arches. They used iron to clamp stones together. The Egyptians used precise stonework and, in some layers, gypsum mortar. The Inca achievement is defined by the absence of these technologies. They used no mortar, no iron, no concrete. Their entire structural philosophy was based on interlocking geometry and gravity. A Roman wall bound by mortar is rigid; it resists force until it cracks. An Inca dry stone wall is dynamic, designed to dance during an earthquake and settle back into stability. You can see the legacy of these choices today. Roman ruins across the Mediterranean show dramatic cracks and collapses from seismic activity. The walls of Machu Picchu, after centuries of Andean tremors, still stand with their seams intact. One method fought nature with rigid strength, the other chose to move in harmony with it. Transport presents perhaps the most vivid comparison. The Egyptians used sledges, ramps, and possibly water to move blocks, concepts that relied on a flat, controllable landscape. The Romans had the wheel, carts, roads, and ships. The Incas had none of these for their heaviest work. No wheels, no draft animals, no flat roads. Their system of log rollers, earthen ramps, and rope teams moving 50-ton blocks down narrow mountain paths represents a human-centric triumph of physics and coordination. It was a slower, more perilous ballet where every inch gained was a victory of collective will over impossible topography. This brings us to the final, defining distinction: integration. The Great Pyramid is a monument upon the landscape. The Colosseum is an arena inserted into the urban fabric. Machu Picchu is something else entirely. It is of the landscape. Its terraces mimic the mountain's contours. Its water channels follow the natural gradient. Its temples frame the sacred peaks. Its very stones were often shaped around revered rock outcrops, honoring the existing sacred geography. While other wonders demonstrate humanity's power to reshape a site, Machu Picchu demonstrates a profound philosophy of weaving a site into a living, functional part of the ecosystem. It was engineered not to dominate nature, but to complete a sacred circuit between the mountain, the water, and the sky. In this light, the city is not merely an ancient wonder, but a timeless lesson in adaptive, resilient, and harmonious design, a testament to what can be built when you listen to the earth instead of simply commanding it. Machu Picchu stones speak a language of profound ecological intelligence, one that resonates with urgent clarity in our modern world. This was not a conquest of the mountain, but a meticulous collaboration with it, offering a 500-year-old blueprint for sustainable living. The core principle is breathtakingly simple yet revolutionary. They worked with nature as a partner, not an obstacle to be overcome. Every engineering decision we have explored, from the terraces to the water channels, was rooted in an ethos of harmony, creating a system that gave back as much as it took. Environmental scientists studying the site point to it as a pinnacle of pre-industrial sustainable design, a closed-loop ecosystem carved in granite. The agricultural terraces are the most visible lesson. They were not merely flat spaces for crops, they were active agents of soil conservation and erosion control. By transforming steep, unstable slopes into a series of level steps, they eliminated the destructive force of runoff, capturing precious topsoil and water where it was needed most. The layered construction acted like a giant filter, purifying water as it percolated down through the mountain, recharging aquifers instead of causing devastating mudslides. This is a stark contrast to modern slope-clearing methods that often lead to catastrophic erosion and loss of fertile land. The city's entire hydrology was a mimicry of a natural watershed. The Incas did not pipe water in from a distant river draining an external source. They identified a single, modest spring and amplified its potential through gentle, gravity-fed channels. The sequential fountains and subterranean drains created a system that used every drop with reverence, from ceremonial use to irrigation, before returning it cleanly to the environment. There were no pumps, no fossil fuels, just an elegant understanding of gravity and gradient. Even the architecture leveraged passive environmental control. The orientation of buildings and the strategic placement of windows harnessed the sun's path for warmth and light. The massive stone walls beyond their seismic genius served as thermal batteries. They absorbed the sun's heat during the day and slowly released it through the cold mountain nights, regulating indoor temperatures without any need for external energy. This principle, known as thermal mass, is a cornerstone of modern green building design. The commitment to local materials created a near-zero carbon footprint for construction. Every block of granite was sourced from the mountain itself or the surrounding quarries. There were no supply chains stretching across continents, no emissions from transporting foreign marble or timber. The city was built from the bones of its own location, a practice that minimized environmental disturbance and embedded the structures within the local geology. This holistic approach supported remarkable biodiversity within the terraces. By creating varied microclimates, the Incas cultivated dozens of crop varieties alongside native plants, fostering a resilient agricultural ecosystem that resisted pest outbreaks and crop failure. There is no archaeological evidence of the soil depletion or deforestation that often accompanies large-scale ancient settlements. The site shows a legacy of stability, not degradation. This ancient wisdom is not lost. Today, in communities across the Andes, farmers are reviving and adapting Inca terrace techniques to combat the very real threats of modern soil loss and climate change. They are relearning how to hold the mountain, proving that these methods are not relics but viable solutions. Machu Picchu thus stands as a quiet, powerful challenge to our modern paradigms. It proves that the most advanced engineering is not always about imposing our will with louder machines and stronger materials. Sometimes it is about listening closely, understanding deeply, and designing systems that flow with the land rather than fight against it. The city's greatest lesson may be that true resilience is found not in dominance but in harmony. The 12-angled stone is a marvel of geometry that seems to defy its own material. Its perfect interlocking facets fit so seamlessly into the surrounding wall that it appears less like a crafted block and more like a piece of a solidified, liquid puzzle. This surreal precision has, for decades, fueled a persistent whisper in the shadows of mainstream archaeology, a question that asks if such perfection could truly be the product of human hands alone. Could the builders of Machu Picchu have possessed a lost technology, a secret method now forgotten by time? Theories range from the use of a mythical plant extract that could soften granite like clay, to the intervention of a more advanced, vanished civilization, or even guidance from otherworldly visitors. These ideas are compelling narratives, but they belong to the realm of myth, not to the evidence written in the stone itself. To understand why, we must listen to what the stones actually tell us and separate the seductive story from the demonstrable science. The most common alternative theory suggests the Incas used a chemical solvent, a liquid stone mixture, to melt and mold granite. Geologists who specialize in Andean materials provide a clear physical rebuttal. Granite is an igneous rock formed under immense heat and pressure within the Earth's crust. To melt it requires temperatures exceeding 1,200 degrees Celsius, a heat that would have left obvious signs of vitrification, a glassy residue on the stone surfaces. No such evidence exists at Machu Picchu. What we find instead are the unmistakable signatures of meticulous manual tooling. On unfinished blocks and in the quarries, the stones are covered in a constellation of small, rounded pits, the distinctive pockmarks left by hammerstones. On dressed surfaces, you can find fine, parallel striations, the scratches left by hours of grinding with abrasive sand and water. These are not the marks of a mysterious softening agent. They are the fingerprints of immense, sustained human effort. Another persistent idea proposes that the knowledge must have come from an older, superior civilization, perhaps even survivors from the mythical lost continent of Atlantis. This theory often stems from a subtle, troubling assumption, a reluctance to grant indigenous American civilizations full credit for their own intellectual and engineering triumphs. It implies that such perfection must have an external, often European or fantastical, source. Archaeology refutes this by showing a clear, evolutionary progression of stoneworking within the Andes. The techniques seen at Machu Picchu did not appear overnight. They are the pinnacle of a long tradition that can be traced back through centuries of Inca development and even earlier cultures like the Tiwanaku, who also mastered monumental stone construction. The evidence shows innovation, not inheritance from a phantom source. So why do these myths hold such power over our imagination? They speak to our own sense of awe. When faced with an achievement that feels almost superhuman, it can be easier to attribute it to superhuman means. It simplifies the mystery. Believing in a lost solvent or ancient astronauts can feel more satisfying than grappling with the true scale of the accomplishment, which was built on generations of observation, trial and error, and patient physical labor. These theories, however well-intentioned, inadvertently diminish the real story. They replace a narrative of human ingenuity and cultural brilliance with a deus ex machina, a magical solution that robs the Inca people of their rightful legacy. The truth, grounded in the hard evidence of tool marks and quarry sites, is ultimately more inspiring. It tells us that every seamless joint, every curved wall, every celestial alignment was born from the human mind, the skilled eye, and the calloused hand. It was not magic but mastery, achieved through a profound understanding of materials, physics, and the environment. This makes Machu Picchu not a relic of alien visitors, but a monument to human potential, a testament to what a society can achieve when knowledge, organization, and purpose align. Recognizing this shifts our wonder from the speculative to the tangible, from asking who helped them to marveling at what they built themselves. And this tangible achievement now faces its greatest modern challenge, not from myths, but from the very feet of those who come to admire it. The wisdom locked within Machu Picchu stones was never meant to be a secret. It was a practical language for survival, spoken for generations across the peaks and valleys of the Andes. That language did not fall silent with the empire's end. It simply went local, passed down through families and communities, becoming the quiet, enduring backbone of life in the highlands. Drive through the rural Andes today, and you will witness this living legacy in every meticulously terraced hillside, in the sturdy stone corrals dotting the slopes, and in the foundations of countless homes. This is not a museum display, but a continuous, unbroken practice. The technique is known as perca, the traditional art of dry stone walling, using the same principles of interlocking stones and gravity that built the royal enclosures. Farmers and builders construct retaining walls to prevent erosion, create level planting beds on steep terrain, and raise enclosures for their animals. The knowledge is often transferred without blueprints from elder to child through the act of doing. A young person learns to select stones by their shape and grain, to listen for the solid clack as two pieces settle into place, and to understand how a wall must lean slightly inward to hold the pressure of the earth behind it. This is Inca engineering stripped of its imperial scale, returned to its essential purpose, supporting community life in a demanding landscape. Beyond these everyday applications, there is a powerful revival of interest in the larger systems. As modern agriculture grapples with soil degradation and water scarcity, agronomists and environmentalists are looking back to the Inca model as a source of sustainable solutions. In regions like the Colca Valley and the Sacred Valley itself, development projects are working with local communities to rehabilitate ancient terraces and irrigation canals. The goal is not to create a tourist attraction, but to restore a functional, resilient food system. These reconstructed terraces demonstrate their original genius, controlling erosion, conserving water, and creating microclimates that allow for diverse crop production without chemical fertilizers. The pre-Columbian hydraulic networks, with their gentle gradients and stone-lined channels, are being studied as blueprints for efficient, low-impact water management in mountainous regions vulnerable to climate change. This is not nostalgia, it is practical adaptation, recognizing that these ancient techniques represent centuries of refined observation and problem-solving. The influence also ascends into the realm of modern art and architecture. Walk through the streets of Cusco or Arequipa, and you will see the aesthetic echo of Inca stonework in contemporary buildings, public plazas, and monuments. Architects deliberately incorporate the trapezoidal shape, the textured rustication of polygonal stones, and the clean lines of ashlar masonry into new designs. This is more than a stylistic homage, it is a cultural reclamation, a way of weaving a visible thread of identity into the urban fabric. Perhaps most significantly, the seismic wisdom of the Incas is finding new relevance in modern engineering. In a region perpetually threatened by earthquakes, the principles of dynamic design, flexible foundations, and trapezoidal supports are being analyzed and adapted. While no modern skyscraper is built with dry stone walls, the conceptual approach of designing structures to dissipate energy rather than rigidly resist it is a direct philosophical descendant of what was perfected at Machu Picchu. Research institutions in Peru and abroad are studying the site's response to tremors, hoping to translate its ancient resilience into new building codes and materials. This enduring legacy reshapes our final understanding of the Cloud City. It proves that the solutions forged on that impossible peak were not merely for a royal estate or a fleeting spiritual moment. They contained a universal, practical wisdom for enduring in the Andes. The true masterpiece of Machu Picchu was not the city itself, but the knowledge system it represented, a system so robust and so deeply connected to the logic of the land that it could outlive empires, transcend conquest, and continue to guide hands and shape lives 500 years later. The stones on the mountain were a culmination, but the real creation was the understanding they embodied, an understanding that never left and is now being heard with fresh urgency. A single stone step on the main pathway can be worn down by nearly half an inch over a decade. This is the quiet, relentless cost of wonder, the physical price paid by a site never designed for the footsteps of 2 million visitors each year. The very global recognition that saved Machu Picchu from oblivion now presents its greatest modern peril, a delicate balancing act between sharing a treasure and safeguarding its existence. The mountain itself is a living, breathing entity, and the immense pressure of modern tourism strains its fragile cloud forest ecosystem and the ancient stonework woven into it. Conservationists now face a continuous battle, one fought with ticket scanners, soil sensors, and profound respect, to protect this impossible engineering from the unintended consequences of its own fame. The core challenge is an ethical equation: how to allow access for education and cultural appreciation without compromising the site's physical integrity for future generations. The solution has been a framework of strict science-based regulations. Entry is now controlled through a system of timed tickets, capping the number of visitors allowed each day. Within the citadel, everyone follows designated one-way walking circuits. These routes are not arbitrary. They are carefully planned to distribute foot traffic, preventing bottlenecks and allowing overstressed areas periods of rest. You cannot wander freely anymore, and this is by design, a necessary sacrifice of spontaneity for survival. Behind the scenes, a team of archaeologists, engineers, and botanists performs constant vigilance. Using the laser scans and drone mapping we discussed earlier, they monitor the site for the slightest movement in walls or terraces, measuring cracks down to the millimeter. Erosion damage from heavy rains is repaired with a principle known as minimal intervention, using traditional materials like local clay and stone dust to stabilize structures without introducing modern concrete that could cause further damage. Even managing the lush vegetation is a science, as roots can dislodge stones, but removing plants entirely can lead to soil instability. It is a perpetual, careful negotiation with nature, just as it was for the original builders. The threats are both immediate and slow-moving. The increased frequency of intense rainfall, linked to broader climate patterns, raises the risk of landslides on the already steep slopes the city is built upon. Furthermore, the simple presence of thousands of people daily alters the microclimate, with body heat and humidity affecting the immediate environment around the stonework. In response, conservation employs both cutting-edge technology and ancient wisdom. When a section like the Temple of the Condor is closed for restorative work, the repairs often utilize the same dry stone masonry techniques used 5 centuries ago, a conscious choice to honor the original fabric and its inherent flexibility. This modern stewardship is in its own way a monumental feat of engineering. It requires managing a complex system of human flow, environmental monitoring, and delicate repair, all while upholding the site's spiritual and historical significance. The goal is not to freeze Machu Picchu in time, but to ensure its slow, graceful aging continues, allowing the dialogue between the stones and the mountain to endure for centuries more. This ongoing effort reframes our relationship with the site, from passive spectators to responsible guests in a very old, very fragile home. That silent dawn at the sun gate holds more than just a breathtaking view. It holds a mirror to our own potential. Beyond the engineering marvels and historical mysteries, Machu Picchu's most enduring legacy is a philosophical one, a testament to the boundless capacity of the human spirit when vision, perseverance, and collaboration converge. The city is a physical argument against impossibility. It proves that the greatest barriers we face are seldom the mountain or the missing tool, but the limits we place on our own imagination and our willingness to commit to a dream that outlives us. Consider the mindset required to begin such a project. An emperor or a high priest stands on that raw, unstable ridge, surrounded by vertigo and wind. They do not see an uninhabitable precipice. They see a sacred conversation waiting to happen between stone and sky. This is the essence of visionary thinking, the ability to perceive a profound order where others see only chaos. It is the courage to define a purpose so compelling that it justifies decades of grueling labor. This initial leap of faith to commit a civilization's resources to a task with no guaranteed outcome is perhaps the first and most critical engineering feat of all. Then comes the perseverance, not of a single lifetime, but of generations. The master stonemason who began dressing a block for the Temple of the Sun knew he would not live to see its final stone placed. He worked for a future he would never inhabit, trusting that his children or his apprentices would carry the vision forward. This long-term thinking is a radical departure from our modern focus on immediate results. It represents a covenant with the future, a belief that some creations are so essential they are worth the patient investment of a century. Every perfectly fitted stone is a vote of confidence in the generations to come. Finally, there is the monumental power of unified effort. Machu Picchu was not built by a lone genius, but by a symphony of thousands, from the quarryman to the rope maker to the water channel engineer. Each individual contributed a fragment of skill toward a masterpiece none could have built alone. This collaboration across disciplines and communities speaks to a profound social technology, the ability to align diverse talents toward a single, majestic goal. It reminds us that our most audacious achievements are always collective. These principles are not relics, they are urgently relevant. Today, we face our own impossible mountains, from climate adaptation to sustainable urban design. The lesson of Machu Picchu is not to replicate its stones, but to embrace its process. It calls for a deep understanding of our environment, meticulous planning rooted in respect, and the mobilization of collective will toward long-term harmony. Engineers studying seismic resilience, artists seeking beauty in function, and communities building for sustainability all draw inspiration from this cloud forest citadel. Ultimately, the city stands as a permanent question etched in granite. What could we build if we combined a visionary's dream with a generation's patience and a society's united effort? The stones of Machu Picchu whisper that our true potential is unlocked not by the tools in our hands, but by the scope of what we dare to envision together. We have walked alongside the architects of the impossible, tracing the logic of their terraces and the poetry of their stones. Machu Picchu stands not as a relic of a lost world, but as a living conversation between humanity and the earth, a dialogue written in water and granite that still speaks to us across 5 centuries. It teaches us that resilience is not about brute force, but about intelligent harmony, that a society's strength can be measured by its patience, its willingness to listen to the land, and its courage to build for a future it will never see. Every interlocking block, every gravity-fed fountain, every solstice-aligned window is a testament to a culture that saw no divide between the sacred and the practical, between engineering and art. The mist that perpetually gathers and parts over the citadel feels like a breath, a reminder that this place is still alive with the spirit of its creation. It challenges our modern assumptions about progress, showing us that the most advanced solutions can be elegant, silent, and born from deep observation. So as we leave these cloud-shrouded peaks, we carry forward a question not about the past, but about our own future. What could we build if we combined such profound respect for nature with such unified purpose? If this journey through ancient genius has sparked your curiosity, consider joining us as we explore more of history's deepest mysteries. We would love to hear your thoughts. Which engineering feat here amazed you the most? Share in the comments below.